Does Milwaukee have the best track saw on the market, and should you buy one? Answers to all these questions coming up in this video. Let's go. So a couple of weeks back, I picked up this Milwaukee Track Saw, and here's the reason why I decided I needed a track saw in my shop. Number one, I needed an accurate way to break down sheets of plywood. Honestly, the table saw in my shop, it's got some things around it, so it's impossible for me to break down an entire 4x8 sheet of plywood on my table saw. I had been using my circular saw to break down plywood or sheet goods like that, and honestly, it just is not giving me the accuracy that I need because it's a circular saw. It's meant for rough cuts. It's not meant for accurate cuts. The track saw will provide me accuracy for breaking down sheets of plywood. Another reason why I wanted a track saw is because I do a lot of live edge coffee tables, end tables, things like that. And I need a way to effectively put a straight joint, edge joint on these live edge boards. You'll see me do this later in this video. I thought a track saw would be helpful for me as I'm making these coffee tables and end tables. You'll find out soon if I was right. In either case, I bought this track saw, and today I'm gonna unbox it, test it, give you all my thoughts on it, and whether you should buy one. Let's get into it. So with the Milwaukee Track Saw, you can buy this track saw in a lot of different ways. You can buy just the tool, which is what I did. I've seen Milwaukee put together tool packages where you can get a track saw and a miter saw. Milwaukee also has where you can get this track saw with some other accessories that come with the track saw, like the tracks, track clamps, and it comes with this really, really nice Milwaukee pack out case. Before I bought this saw, watched several other videos on this track saw, and kind of the reoccurring theme that kept on coming up in those videos was that the pack out case is massive. This tool, by the way, like my first impressions of this, when I took it out of the box, very first thought I had was, this thing is huge. I mean, huge, huge, huge. And so what these people were saying though in these other videos was when you put this inside the pack out, there's even space in the pack out. And so I just didn't really want that taking up room in my shop. I'm not gonna be moving this from job site to job site very much. So I opted to not get the pack out case. However, if you're a contractor maybe that will take this saw from different job sites to different job sites, I would probably recommend storing this rather expensive saw in the Milwaukee pack out case. So when you get just the tool, you're gonna get, of course, the track saw. You're gonna get this dust bag. This comes with pretty much any package. You're gonna get this splinter guard, and then you're gonna get this 6.5-inch blade. One note about this blade is this is proprietary to Milwaukee. So, you know, a lot of saws like table saws or other types of saws, you can get different brand blades, different types of blades. If you're gonna get the Milwaukee track saw, you've gotta stick with this blade. So we'll see later in the video how this blade holds up. But it's 6.5 inches. I'm pretty sure the Festool track saw, their blade is 6.25 inches. So this will give you like a little bit more cutting depth. Interesting note. Batteries, unless you get some kind of combo kit, are not included. I picked up the M18 XC 5.0 battery with this track saw. By the way, if you're confused on what's the difference between all the different M18 batteries, let me just give you a quick 30-second course on this. You've got M12 batteries, 12-volt batteries for smaller Milwaukee tools, and you have M18 batteries, 18-volt batteries for larger Milwaukee tools. In the M18 platform, you have 3 levels of batteries. You've got CP, you have XC, and then you have HD. Then, to make everything more complicated, each one of those batteries, CP, XC, and HD, has a high-performance version that gives you, according to Milwaukee, like 50% more power. So there's lots of different kinds of batteries. Oh, and on top of that, you can get different amps. So the higher the amp, the more power the battery provides to the tool. If that's not confusing, I don't know what is. But this is the XC 5.0. It's not the high output battery. Basically, this is like a middle of the road battery. I'll link lots of batteries that you can get for this saw down in the description. I will say I would not recommend using a CP battery in this track saw. We're gonna try out a CP battery in this track saw later in the video, but spoiler alert, let's just stick with these. So when you get this out of the box, the first thing you're going to notice, especially if you've never used a track saw before, is that there are tons of adjustment knobs all over this thing. So let me just really quickly go over the basics. Right here on the back, you've got your depth and gauge. So if you have this button not pressed down, your saw's going to be locked in the upright position. But once you engage this, you're free to move it. Of course, you have your trigger to start the saw right below that. Also love this handle that they give you right here. And once again, by the way, this tool, it gives you what I call the Milwaukee feel. Any brushless Milwaukee tool is just going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be very comfortable in the hands. It's going to use metal, high quality plastic, rubber grip. It's just going to give you a great feel. Now, right here you have your depth adjustments, and there's a couple of different things you need to know about this. First of all, it's adjustable, of course. So if you want to cut at a 1/2 inch depth or 1.5 inch depth, whatever, you can adjust that to be where you like. Now it gives you two indicators right here, one line and then two lines. The lower of the lines is when you're using it essentially as a circular saw. And so you can actually cut material with this saw without using a track. I wouldn't recommend getting this as your primary circular saw, but you can essentially use it as a circular saw. So that's your depth there. However, right here where these two lines are, this is going to be your depth when you're using the track. If you think about it, the track is moving your saw up slightly away from the material that you're cutting, so it makes sense that that's going to be your depth when you're using the track. This track saw, of course, can cut bevels. So a couple of things you need to know about this. There are two knobs that you need to loosen, one in the front and one in the back, and then you can start to pivot this saw at any bevel you want. The range of bevel for this track saw is -1 degree to +48 degrees. So you're getting more than just 0 to 45. That's really handy for a lot of applications. So this is really good. Don't forget about the back bevel knob. I did that at first and I was like, man, this is really tough to adjust. I didn't realize there were two bevels. I like that there's two bevel knobs because once you lock it in, you know that it's going to hold that bevel really nicely. Now also right here on the front, you have this, it's called a 22.5, or it says labeled 22.5. And what this does is it gives you a positive stop at 22.5 degrees when this is engaged. So once I lower this down, it's engaged. My track saw is going to stop right at 22.5. And so I got to disengage that if I want to go past 22.5 degrees. Now there's going to be another positive stop at another common angle, which is 45 degrees. But let's say I want to cut something a little past 45 degree bevel. Then what I'm going to have to do is come down to this knob back here, press it forward, and that releases my saw to get up to 46, 47, or 48 degrees. That disengages, and then it's that same knob right there that gets you to -1 degree if you need it. Down here on the base plate, we have two knobs to make sure that the saw is running snugly in the track. Talk more about that later. We also have this anti-tilt feature. That's going to be handy. I think this might be the only track saw that I know of, at least, that has this feature. I know the Festool does not have this feature. I've got some things to say about this when we're testing this saw out later. Other than that, you've got variable speed right back here, easy access, and then of course you have your battery port right here. You also have onboard tool storage for when you're changing out your blade, and you have a little viewing window here. You can switch this out for a splinter guard, but make sure you either have your viewing window or your splinter guard engaged here. You don't want to have this open to where fingers can get caught inside that. Oh, and also you have your dust port back here. Pretty obvious, but not sure if I mentioned that. This can pivot. Nice little feature. Really quickly, I'm going to go ahead and install this blade. I'm going to get out the tracks, and we're going to see how this thing performs. So this right here is the Milwaukee aluminum track saw track. This is what makes a track saw different from a circular saw. You can use these tracks to make sure that your saw is making perfectly straight cuts. Now, Milwaukee has several different lengths of these tracks, and you can interconnect these tracks to make even longer lengths. So this is the 55-inch length track. I picked this up because, truthfully, I bought this track saw with a couple of projects in mind, and I knew that this length track would be enough to get me started. But once again, like I said, you can connect these. So if you want to get 255s, you can connect them. My friend Matt Outlaw over at 731 Woodworks, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out his channel, be sure to go subscribe to his channel. He's always doing tons of awesome stuff. But he recommends that you get at least two 55-inch tracks, so that way you can rip an entire sheet of plywood, which is 96 inches. You can rip one of those down all the way. So, of course, I didn't listen to his advice, and I just bought one 55-inch track. I will probably add on to this. Also, note about this track saw is that it can ride on other tracks. So, Festool tracks, maybe there's a few other brands that if you have tracks for some reason for Festool or some of those other brands that this saw is compatible with, you can use them. You might just have to adjust your knobs a little bit here. On the bottom of this track, there are these little grip pads, which I think is really nice. I've seen people say that if you're cutting down some plywood, something that's really flat, you don't even really need to clamp this down because I'm like pushing this on my table. This is really, really grippy. And one more thing I'll say about this track is it feels really robust. It doesn't feel like I'm going to easily bend it. I'll talk about some techniques for using a track saw in a second, but this feels really good. So to install your saw on the track, all you have to do is simply drop it right in place there. It fits right over this groove. Now, if these knobs are loose, this is, something that's important. You can see there's some give in the saw. The saw is moving independent of the track. You don't want that, so you want to tighten these down, but you don't want to tighten them down so much that it's difficult to push your saw. So I get it to where it's difficult to push your saw, then just back off maybe like 1/8 of a turn. You can see this thing is moving really freely, but when I twist the saw, there's no give. That's the tightness you want for these guys. Now, I told you earlier about this rollover feature, essentially. So let's say I loosen my bevels, and I'm cutting something at a 45. Let's say I lock that in. Look at what my base of my saw is wanting to do. It's wanting to ride up out of that track, which would not be good. So what you can do is engage this anti-tilt feature, and so now I'm going to let go. This thing is holding the track saw in the track. However, what I will say is there's still a little bit of give right there. So what I would recommend, even if you have this engaged, if you're making like a 45 rip cut or something, you want to have your hand right here, not close to the blade, but right here on the track, pushing down to the track, and that's going to, along with the anti-kickover feature, keep your saw making a nice clean cut. I mentioned earlier that these tracks can be clamped down, but of course you don't want to be clamping these with like some kind of clamp that's going to be in the way of your saw on the track. So these tracks come with ridges, and they come with a certain type of clamp that you can use to basically clamp the tracks down from the bottom of the track, which is pretty cool. Now, you can buy some Milwaukee Track Saw clamps. I did not buy them, and I was driving to the shop this morning to review this, and I thought, wait a second, I didn't buy clamps. That might be a problem. But then I had a thought. What if I can use my micro jig dovetail clamps to clamp these down? I'm like, probably won't fit. But I tested it out, and these dovetail clamps fit perfectly in the track slot. I'm so fired about this. So if you have some dovetail clamps like these from micro jig, which you need to have these anyway in your shop, I've used them a ton in other videos, I'm sure you've seen it, these will clamp down your track to your workpiece. One more thing we gotta do before we fire up this track saw, I promise I'm not stalling, is we have to cut off the rubber on this track. What this is gonna do is create a zero clearance edge between the blade and where this track ends. And so what you can do is you don't even have to mark your cut line on your material. You can just place your track down, and you know the edge of your track is gonna be where the cut happens. So yeah, it's a pretty nice feature. Let's do that right now. So trimming up this track was the first time I fired up this track saw, and I just want to say, first impressions, one, it seems very powerful. Now, we didn't really cut anything, so we'll test that in a second. Another thing that's really nice about this saw is it stops on a dime. You heard that when I stopped it, it went and cut off really, really quickly. I just think that's a nice safety feature. I like that in routers. I like that in saws. I think that's really, really good. All right, now let's actually put this thing to the test. So right here, I have a slab of 7 foot long, over 1.5 inches thick, hard maple. It's got live edge on one side. And what I want to do with this is make a matching pair of waterfall end tables. However, this edge right here, even though it's not live edge, it's not square. So we're going to cut some cross cuts here because I only have a short track, and then we're going to do some rip cuts. We're going to see how this track saw performs, and then I'll give you my honest thoughts on whether you should buy this saw or not. Right here, I'm set up to do a rip cut. Since this rubber edge is 0 clearance from the blade, I know this is right where my blade's going to be, and so if I run this down the track, it's going to make a perfectly straight edge. You can see right off the cut that the jointed face of this board is right in line with that rubber edge that we just cut. And it goes that way, all the way down. And since this track is perfectly square, we know that that board is now perfectly edge jointed. And let's go over here real quick to the track saw. Still have 3 bars of battery, so that's pretty good. Let's go ahead and joint this board, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. When you're running your track saw, you want to make sure all of your momentum is going along the track. Let the saw do the work. Don't try to force it. Hey, before we finish up the review of this Milwaukee Track Saw, if this video has been helpful for you, I need one favor from you. I need you to hit the like button on this video. Also, if you want to stick around for future tool reviews from Milwaukee, also Ryobi, lots of other tool companies, be sure to hit the subscribe button. It's totally free. It just makes my videos a little bit easier to find, and it means the world to me. Hey, thank you so much. Let's keep on going with this video. So I just got back in the shop from cutting down these maple slabs right here behind me, which, by the way, if you want to see me turn these into waterfall joint end tables, be sure to hit subscribe. That video will be coming out soon, and if it's already out, I'll link it down in the description. So overall thoughts on this track saw. Overall, I'm very, very impressed. Generally, any Milwaukee brushless tool that I review, I'm going to probably like it overall because this just the quality is so good. As far as the blade goes, I mentioned earlier that this is a proprietary blade that Milwaukee has. So that's the blade that you're going to have to use if you have this track saw. Fortunately, the blade was really good. Like right here on this over 1.5 inch thick maple, there wasn't any kind of burn marks or anything like this. This left a really, really clean cut, and that's hard maple, so that was really, really impressive to me. I thought the saw performed very well. It holds in the track extremely well if you have your adjustment knobs properly calibrated. I will say I was using the XC5 amp battery. After making all those cuts out there that you just saw me make, this thing says it's got half battery life left, which is pretty solid. However, there were times where I really felt like this saw was giving it everything it had. So I would recommend this be the lowest power battery that you try in this saw. Earlier in the video, I said, hey, we're going to try out the CP, like 3 amp battery in the saw. It would not work. Like maybe if I was cutting down cheat goods, it'd be fine. But if you're going to be doing anything like I was doing with the hard maple, you might even need an HD battery. At the minimum, use the XC 6.0, and I'll link that down in the description. Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on the battery. Overall, if you are in the market for a track saw, and if you're on the M18 or the Milwaukee battery platform, I would highly recommend this track saw. It will not lead you wrong. I mean, this is a great tool. I think the only thing, I'm not really speaking from experience, so take this with a grain of salt. The only thing that I would say, wow, I really wish this saw had, would be the kickback feature. At one point it got bound up when I was making a cross cut, and you probably saw that saw jump back on me. Festool's track saw does have an anti-kickback feature, so it kind of stops the saw right there if it detects that it's getting bound up or something like that. So that would probably be my only gripe with this saw, but that's a minor thing. And really you're not going to encounter that very often. Hey, thank you so much for checking out this video. Check out one of these two videos. This video, I'm reviewing another Milwaukee tool, and right here is another video I know you'll love. So check out one of these two videos. I'll see you there.